I feel like it's always a work in progress, and the things that I do when I'm in a good space, when I am in balance, are going to be so essential when I'm not. Because that's going to be the time where I'm going to be like, I'm going to be grasping, I'm going to be fighting reality, and then there's going to be that small voice in the back of my head that's like, wait, radical acceptance. Maybe you're not there right now, but we're going to kind of just keep thinking about that. Giving myself hope that I will have a life worth living.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. You are all in for an amazing interview today with Caitlin Billings. Caitlin is a licensed clinical social worker in the state of California. Caitlin specializes in deep trauma therapy and is pursuing EMDR therapy certification. And she is now an author of the book In Our Blood. So we're really excited to be talking about this book, and it's a memoir. So we get to learn a lot about Caitlin in her memoir. I know I did, and we'll get to learn more about you here. So welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. This is
Thank
a
you.
podcast I've been really looking forward to.
It is definitely one that's going to uh, relate. We were talking just before even starting the interview that a lot of people will relate to different aspects of your story in different ways, because you've definitely had quite a dense life in a very short amount of years. You're a young mom of two, a therapist, and you've been through so much. So I am just happy that you are here and you've agreed to share your story a little bit here. So tell us first a little bit about you. Where are you? Where do you live? Where did you grow up? And then we'll dive into the conversation.
Yeah. So I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I grew up in Humboldt County, which is very northern California. It's the land of redwoods and mist and fog. Um, and that really shaped me. Yeah, I was very exposed to nature and, the elements. And San Francisco was like the big city. And so it's interesting to live here now, although I live in a very small town. Um, yeah, and I'm a therapist, I am an author, and I'm really working toward blending together my work as a therapist as well as my writing life, so that the two, while they are two entities, they're also connected.
And then aside from that, then the also this other big part of your life being a mother, of course, of two.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how do you blend therapy, author, and parenthood, all of it? And how long did it take you to write your memoir?
It's been about 10 years in the making. But I would say like it's really been the last 5 years, 4 years that I've really pursued having it published. That first 6 years was really a lot of writing groups, critiquing other people's chapters. They critiqued mine. I went through a process of learning how to write a memoir. So I did it backwards. I wrote it and then I learned about it and it was like, oh crap, I have to like rewrite this because now I understand. So that was a big part of it. And then as I was writing the memoir, life just kept happening. So part one of my memoir was actually supposed to originally be the memoir. And then part two is everything that happened while I was writing it. So that's kind of why it took so long.
No, and it is. It's like what we were talking about. It's like a very dense story. And I was telling you that I had to actually put it down for a little bit because it was
Mhm.
so much. And for someone reading this, this is something that you will be able to relate in different aspects of it in some shape or form. For me, of course, that aspect of even motherhood, I could relate in that chapter of your life there. Um, and then but yeah, but just be prepared to know that you might have to also take some breaks, because it is, if it's something there that relates to your own life, which I'm sure there are a lot that will find that, you'll have to also have grace for yourself and be okay to put it down for a minute to then take on. Because so
Yeah.
how did you have grace with yourself as you were writing this? And we'll talk a little bit more, of course, about your life, snippets, so
Hmm.
that people still
Hmm.
read the memoir. But yeah, how did you have grace with yourself as you're writing this, as you're uncovering all these different layers of your life as you're writing?
Yeah, well, I was in therapy the entire time that I was writing the book, and my therapist really helped me. She would actually read some of the drafts that I wrote, like small drafts, and then we would break it down in therapy. So a lot of the exploring that I did of my early life was simultaneously done with therapy.
Mhm.
Um, and then I learned I had to take breaks. A lot of the writing in the first few years could at times had a very feverish, obsessive kind of quality to it that has, I think, to do with my mental health
Where
condition.
you were.
Um, yeah, and so I think I learned to give myself grace. I learned that actually, if I'm starting to feel very obsessive about it, it's time to put it away for a little while. So my journey has really been about balance. It's been about um, self-acceptance, and I think that's one of the pieces, right, is like if I'm obsessing over something, I'm probably not in the present moment. I'm probably not very balanced, and I may not be like attending to myself as a person who has needs.
So let's go into that. What then do you do to then realize, and we'll talk about the aspect of you being diagnosed with bipolar disorder when you were already a therapist,
Yes.
correct? Yes.
Yes.
So we can you please go into some of these tools that you use then when you start noticing yourself as a therapist? Wait a minute, I'm kind of getting out of whack, as you know, I'm kind of going out of whack. How do you then rebalance yourself?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and it's something that I think is going to be a lifelong focus for me. Um, so in the past, balance was really, really tough for me to achieve and resulted in kind of multiple, both what is considered a hypomanic episode, which is kind of a smaller mania. It's not I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't thinking that I was, Mary. I wasn't having religious preoccupation. But I do tend to take on a lot. Like when I'm feeling good, I have a lot of ideas and they all seem to fit together, and I generate things very quickly. Um, so what happens though is that I do that and then I don't attend to myself and then I crash. And really it's the depressive episodes that are the most problematic for me. If I could be hypomanic all the time, I would totally like hang out
But
there.
yeah, but how do you sustain being hypomanic, right, all the
Right,
time, right?
right.
Because it's like the body's gonna have to give at some point, right? So,
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So I've learned, as I've grown as a therapist, I really believe that if I'm going to be supporting someone or offering interventions or sitting with them through their process, I have to walk the walk. Like, I can't go in and be like, you should use your five senses and be in the moment and take a walk. And then I go home and I take a 3 hour nap and I'm like depressed and feeling like I can't go on. Like that is not that to me that doesn't feel healthy. And so a lot of what I do with my clients, I'm also doing for myself. And I actually happen to work with clients who have some similar aspects to my own mental health journey. And I think that it's really appropriate because I'm not intimidated or scared when they're telling me about these really dark things that they're thinking about. In fact, I feel very grounded. I feel very able to be present. And to answer your question, I so exercise is very important. I I can have grandiose ideas about, I'm going to go and I'm going to do whatever. But I've really
Bite sizes,
exactly.
Caitlin, bite size.
So I'm taking it, yeah, bite sizes of like listening to my body first of all. What does my body need today? Oh, maybe it just needs like 20 minutes of yin yoga. Like that's really where I'm at today. And that's a practice that I've recently discovered, which is very contemplative and slow and internal, kind of meditative. And then there's other days where I can feel that I really need cardio. I need to take a walk. And I live in a town that has like enormous hills. So it's very cardio walk. It's not just a stroll.
And strength, because if you're going up hills, you're doing some good
Yes.
leg workout, good glute
Yeah.
workout there.
Yeah. And then also just practicing radical acceptance. That's something
Mm,
I talk to my clients about a lot. And it really fits in with grief because in order to move through grief, you have to get into reality. And in grief, that's part of it is we fight the reality of what has happened. We bargain, we deny that it's happened, we say it's not fair, we get caught up in the the horrible parts of what has happened, but we can't move forward because we're trying to push it away. So for me, I'm all like, I probably talk to myself about radical acceptance every day, at least once a day, either because I'm talking to a client about it, or I'm in a space where I'm like, yeah, I feel a little overwhelmed right now, or yeah, I had a really intense interaction with somebody, and I can feel my stuff come up, and some of that is just human, and some of that is related to my own trauma. So I have to make space for that.
mm,
Otherwise, it just accumulates, and then it contributes to my mental health condition. So it's very, very important that I practice radical acceptance. I do a lot of mindfulness work in a way that is not like, I don't sit down and meditate, but mindfulness is just throughout my day. And I'll take like a 2 minute, just sit in my chair in my office and breathe. Or when I come home, I'll just kind of sit on my bed and like, okay, ground and center,
being
with
present,
food.
being
Yeah,
present.
be
Yeah, being
present, or
present.
be with my family. Or if I can't, like if I'm like, I need something, I'll take a shower because
Mhm,
like the water is very soothing and
mm,
cleansing to kind of just metaphorically wash the ick
mm.
off. Um, but it's a work in progress, you
Yeah.
know. I'm also in a space right now where there's not a lot of grief in my life. There's actually a lot of openness and fluidity and excitement. Um, but I know it will come because that's part of being human. We are going to suffer. And the
Mhm,
longer we are alive, the more suffering we will encounter because we will start to lose people. We will, things happen. We
mhm,
don't live in a protective bubble.
mhm.
So I feel like it's always a work in progress. And the things that I do when I'm in a good space, when I am in balance, are going to be so essential when I'm not. Because that's going to be the time where I'm going to be like, I'm going to be grasping. I'm going to be
Yes,
fighting
yes.
reality, and then there's going to be that small voice in the back of my head that's like, wait, radical acceptance. Maybe you're not there right now, but we're going to kind of just keep thinking about that. Giving myself hope that I will have a life worth living.
What you said is so important because you mentioned about the parts of when you're in a good space. That's when you do actually most of the work, so that when you are in those moments of really losing, grip with life,
Yes.
that you said, like, you barely, like, how are you going to feel like you want to go on a walk when you're like barely even getting out of bed, right? Those
Right.
moments in our life that we go through in this, but because we've done all these other things beforehand, when we are quote unquote in that balanced state or kind of stable state, because balance, I don't know if it really does exist. Right.
Totally. Yeah.
But
It's a buzzword.
yes, it's a buzzword, but really doesn't. There's really something gives or takes, really, almost always.
Yes.
So but in those states in which we're more in that stable state, or when there may be not is not that much grief, like you said, in this particular moment of life, that's when you're like, okay, I'm preparing, I'm gathering all these tools so that when I go camping, I'm prepared for which, the starter fluid, the this, the that, like you're just gathering the tools in those moments of that you're going to need them. So, and like you said, you have these little voices then in your head that are there in that background because you've already prepared yourself for that. And it's your own voices telling you, okay, you got this, you got that. Just breathe today. That's all you need. And
Yep.
so that's awesome. Thank you for those tips. Oops, I'm kicking
Yeah.
the microphone.
Yeah. And
Let
if you
let
don't have it, yeah, that it's okay. You
Yes,
know,
and if you don't,
you're
yeah,
going to be okay, and it's okay to feel all the feelings.
and all the feelings. And something that I want to touch in now is the
Yes.
part of you, of your discovery of your diagnosis. How did that come about? um, we were talking about how grief really that you had experienced early on in your life and trauma kind of just resurfaced later on in your life. Could we talk a little bit about that, please? And then of
Yes.
your diagnosis and how you coped even for that reality, being
Yeah.
a therapist yourself.
Yeah. So yeah, I did grow up with some, various traumas. I think nobody grew up perfectly, right? So we all have trauma from childhood. Um, and my particular trauma kind of set the stage. I had a lot of feelings of abandonment, and that kind of predicted some of the situations that I got into as a young adult that just yeah that were more difficult for me to handle. I was diagnosed with clinical depression when I was 18, and it was the first time in my life that I think I experienced a true depressive episode. Um, that resulted as well in an eating disorder. So those were kind of two things that happened in my late teens, early 20s. However, the way I dealt with it, which is I think it was incredible, is I was pursuing like sociology, psychology in college, and then I realized I was taking a dance class, and I was like, if I'm going to survive my life, I have to move, I have to do dance. I wasn't a dancer. I had no like I had no traditional training.
Really? When I
Yeah.
was reading that in your bio, I just assumed that maybe that's the reason you went into movement kind of therapy because maybe you had, but not.
No,
Beautiful.
so it was a very holistic dance program, and
Beautiful.
we focused a lot on somatics, on the body, on all the yeah, so much.
Mm.
And part of the curriculum was that we created dances, and we created dances about significant universal events that happened to us. And so I did that for 4 years, and I felt great by the end of that. I graduated from college. I really started to feel like myself again. Yes, things had changed. Like I was still carrying some of the eating disordered behavior that really didn't abate for a long time, but I was much more stable. Um, and I moved back to California, met my husband. We had 2 kids, kind of in a whirlwind. It was also around 9/11, so things just were really chaotic. It felt like the world was ending. We were like, we've got to get married and maybe have a baby, which is a really weird response, but we were very young.
Isn't that what a lot of times people did right before they went to the war? A lot of marriages
Right.
right before
Yes.
they went, and let's get pregnant
Yes.
before I leave, and I need to leave a legacy before I leave this world.
Yes.
Kind of, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and so things went really well. I went to graduate school. He got a teaching credential. We moved back to the San Francisco Bay Area, and we started our careers, and we had these 2 little kids, and life was going really well. Um, and I started my therapy career, and I had an incident where I was held up at gunpoint very unexpectedly. It was sort of like I was chasing my dog in the dark. He ran out of the house, and I chased him quite a ways into a neighborhood that was unsafe. And I was almost back to my house, and I just felt like, okay, there's something behind me. Like I just, that intuition, that feeling that you have. Um, and I turned around, and it was a person with a gun pointing it at me. And I was very confused. And it was just like this moment of like, you're doing one thing, And you think you're in one reality, and then in an instant, everything changes, like everything. And so suddenly, my life was literally right there in front of me, and that it could be eliminated at any second. Um, and so I anyway, what ended up happening is that I kind of caught a moment where the person's attention was not on me, and I took that opportunity to run. And fortunately, they didn't pursue us. I think they probably ran, and nobody was hurt. My dog wasn't hurt. I wasn't hurt. We both came home. Dog ran after me. Um,
Yeah, I
but what
guess I
happened?
hoping he'd never escaped again after that. It's
Right,
like, gosh,
right.
that is traumatic. Yeah.
Right, right. And that is an intense part of the book. And I do share that in that, you know, yeah, I'm giving a lot of details, but I think it's important to understand like these even these things that many people go through, like many people are mugged or many people encounter gun violence. Um that it is so traumatic
Mm,
or can be. And so for me, because I had this trauma, my past trauma, and then
previous.
I also had this history of depression, it set off this cascade of symptoms. And suddenly I felt like I was back in my late teens when some significant traumas had happened. And suddenly I, I basically was falling apart from PTSD symptoms and what felt like depression, but it felt even darker and bigger than that. So I was put on an antidepressant and basically had a breakdown because the medication wasn't appropriate for me, but nobody knew that. And ended up being hospitalized and then received a kind of preliminary bipolar diagnosis, which was then kind of, yeah, they kept giving it to me.
What you said right now is so
Yeah.
important because a lot of times people when I've known people that have gone on medication have had a, a diagnosis, let's say like depression or anxiety, have been given medication for that,
Hmm.
but then end up discovering they are is bipolar. So then all the time the medication that was being used for this part of the bipolar was just not the right fit. And a lot of times people just give up because they just, think that there's no hope. But the reality is you kind of have to keep on searching to figure out one, what is the right diagnosis, right? And two, what is the right medication or therapy or whatever treatment for that diagnosis, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and I think what I would say now looking back is that, and I would say this to anybody listening, is that if you begin to have very concerning symptoms or symptoms that concern you when you start a medication, reach out to your doctor or psychiatrist immediately. And what happened to me is I did start having very concerning symptoms. I started to have suicidal ideation, which I had never had before. And it would just kind of pop into my mind. It wasn't even like I was ruminating and feeling depressed and then, got there. It was literally like I would be fine one minute and the next minute I'm planning my suicide. It was bizarre. And also my moods were all over the place. But because I had this idea of like, I have to have it together. I'm a therapist. I'm a mom. I'm successful. Like I should not be having these symptoms. And so I just kept minimizing them, being like, okay, whatever, like I can get through this. I'll just put that to the side. It's okay. And it just got worse and worse until, yeah, it got so bad that I ended up trying to harm myself.
So for you, do you believe that the fact that you were a therapist, that you felt like you had to have it together because of of what you did for a living, uh, that it was better to just kind of have denial about the reality of your situation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I encounter a lot of health professionals, mental health, yes, but even other health professionals who say a similar thing to me, which is that um, they feel like like I shouldn't even be in therapy. I have all these tools. I have all these skills. Why am I here? Like I shouldn't need to be here. And so there's this extra shame that we as helpers
Mental health
can really
profession,
feel.
especially as mental
Yeah.
health professionals. Yeah. I can see that because but at the same time, then you think, doesn't a doctor end up getting sick at some point and end up having to go and get looked at for a wound or for something? It's not like all of a sudden a medical doctor, like, would also need to go seek help for their own physical health needs. Why is it that there's such a stigma about then the mental health professionals maybe needing also therapy, right? Like, it's not much different, right?
Right, right. And I think the part of it is historical. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Psychology in its roots began was very, in my opinion, was not a feminist practice. It was very patriarchal. It was very I mean, a lot of Freud's work, for example, was focused on young women and the kind of diagnosis of hysteria and what does that mean, and ultimately, as we've moved through the years and through people, practicing psychology, and I actually have a degree in social work, bringing those two together, now we're really beginning to understand, like, it's not like somebody has a moral or ethical issue and that's why they have mental health problems. If they would just get it together, they just need to work harder. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a message that I think many people, many professionals in our society get. And so, uh, yeah, there is a stigma attached to mental health, and especially to substance use.
Mm.
I think depression and anxiety are becoming more mainstream. That's sort of more accepted. Like you say, I have depression, celebrities are coming out as depressed, anxious, and there's not as much of a stigma as there used to be. However, we still struggle, I think, with people who are using substances. And there is hard science and so much science now about the neurochemistry of that dis-ease, and that
Mm-hmm.
literally your brain changes, and it's not that you're not tough enough or you're not, moral enough to stop. It's truly something happening in the brain, just as a bipolar or schizophrenia or PTSD or other diagnoses are as well.
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that, because yeah, you're right. There's so much judgment, right, around all these um, different, mental. What do you say? Mental disorders, mental
I
illness,
usually say
mental health issues. Mental health,
I
is that the
usually
right word?
say, yeah, I usually say mental health condition.
Condition. Thank you.
Yeah,
It's
because
good to know
conditions can
what
change.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, because sometimes when there's like, yeah, if you say disorder, yeah, that's why I wanted to check. Like, there's nowadays, of course, and this is something we can also dive into now, that aspect of words and titles and so forth, and how one little thing can completely come off the wrong way, like me saying mental disorder, mental. So with that, let's then jump into chapter two, no, section two of your
Yeah.
book, part two,
Yeah.
which is now earlier on in your, now closer now in time of
Hmm.
when you wrote the book, of other things that then started to come up in life, which it was you being able to help your child in
Hmm.
their own issues and processes of their own identity, as well as their own uh, also mental conditions at that moment. So
Hmm.
let's talk about a little bit about that, please.
Yeah. So in part two, I had stabilized quite a bit, and I was getting stable around the time that my daughter, was entering adolescence, starting puberty, and kind of in this interesting simultaneous like choreography, I was getting better and she started really struggling. And so she was in seventh grade, she was 12 years old, and she started restricting her food, and that was the first time I found out that there were problems going on that I wasn't even aware of, and it wasn't because, I mean, I think I thought I was just like preoccupied by life and not paying attention. But looking back, she covered it up. She wasn't very forthcoming. And so I took that on and we dealt with that and got her into therapy and things got better. And then I got called to the school by the school counselor to find out that my daughter had been self-harming and really was disclosing concerning thoughts. And so she ultimately was assessed in the emergency room for a 5150 and was 5150 at a psychiatric hospital. Um, and so we were working through that. We were working through that. She came home, and things just were really difficult. And I think I struggled with a lot of like self-doubt and shame, like how is this my fault, where is this my fault, because I feel like it is my fault, either that I passed on the genetics of a mood disorder, depression, anxiety, or bipolar, it wasn't clear,
Mm-hmm.
or I somehow I did this behaviorally, maybe she saw me depressed and so it hurt her in some way, or because she was a very high energy and very emotional child who had trouble regulating her emotion. And so it was like, well, did I respond wrong to her? Did I somehow traumatize her? And this is her kind of her response. So I had all that happening within me. And while I was like, I need to help my child. And so I was helping her. And then things just continued to not be good in our world.
That, yeah, and that part two, of course, is just a whole other added part of that even grief component, because then it's also reliving your own experience too through her
Yeah.
for yourself. And then how did you toil with the decision of when do you tell your child, because your children did not know what you had gone through.
Yeah.
So when you see that your child is struggling in similar ways that you had, at what point do you decide how much do I tell her, because she's at that moment she was really young.
Yeah.
At what point do I tell her that I've gone through something similar? Did
Hmm.
how was that um,
Yeah.
commotion within you? That conversation, tell us about that.
Yeah, I really wanted to tell her, and at the same time I didn't know. I mean, I'm a therapist, but I at the time I was really working only with adults, and
Mm.
so my focus wasn't on children as much. And so I know child development and I know what's generally appropriate, but I really struggled with that, and I think um, I wanted to, and I waited. I waited until the timing felt right. I waited until she was stable. And to me, it was going to be this really big deal. Like, she was going to have this big reaction, and we were maybe going to bond, and it was going to be this big thing. And I told her, and she was like, okay. And then, like, I want to get tickets to this Fall Out Boy concert. It was like, wait a second. I just like disclosed all of this to you, and that's your response. But I just went with it because I realized like I'm really focused on my own process, but she's focused on hers,
Mm.
and so this isn't making the impact I suspected that it would or
Even though
expected.
you thought, oh, she will now know that I can actually truly relate to her. Because even I was going to say that as a therapist, do your patients know that you've been through? Well, now, of course, they know because they see the book. But prior to your book, did your patients know that you had been through similar things? And is that relatability something that then they feel, okay, she knows, like truly knows what I'm going through? And is that then something that connects you deeper to your clients, to
Hmm.
patients, to then be able to help them? Does that make sense? And in the same
It
way,
does.
I'm assuming that
Yeah.
that's what you thought was going to happen then
Right.
with your daughter. But at that time, yeah, was that with Hannah at that moment, Hannah? And we'll
Hmm.
kind of go a
Yeah.
little bit. We'll talk a little bit about the other part. But is that what you thought?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to the question about my clients,
Yeah.
I I actually don't. A lot, I think all but one of my clients even knows that this book is out. And it was because she researched me. She found me on wherever, Psychology Today maybe, and then she just kind of researched me online and saw that this was before my book was released. But she saw kind of my bio and what the book was about, and so she knows. But we had a conversation, and I said, you can ask me about anything that's in the book, or if you're concerned about something you feel like is going to interfere in our therapy, I really want to know. And if you have thoughts or feelings about what you have read in my book,
Hmm.
if you choose to read it, I want to know, because that's part of our relationship. But just know that I'm going to be pretty boundaried about kind of getting deep into conversations about my experience, or getting into what I'm doing presently. Like, this is about you. This is
Hmm.
your therapy. And I'm glad that you appreciate that we, you can relate to me. And like, yes, we have that connection, but really, this is about you. And so the other ways that I just really quick to answer your question, that I work with clients who don't know, is that I will well, one thing is that, I have clients who talk about suicide quite a bit. And there's something about when you start talking about these really scary topics, scary for a lot of people to hear. And your therapist is like, yeah, and like grounded and like, please, yeah, I want to know more. And yeah, like that makes sense. Yeah, you want your pain to end. Of course, of course. Having that validating approach rather than, oh my God, let's make a safety plan. And like, I actually supervise young therapists. And this is something we talk about a lot. This is one of their greatest fears, is that their client's going to bring up suicide and they're not going to know what to do.
Hmm.
So I feel like that communicates to them that I know something. I know something about this. And that they don't even have to know what I know, but just that feeling of like, okay, she gets it. I don't know why she gets it, but she gets it.
Mm. Mm. Now, did that she gets it also then translate afterwards with your daughter at that time?
You know,
At some
not
point, or not?
not I don't think so. I think I think that I think there's just been so much trauma and upheaval in who now goes by Avery, in
Yes,
Avery's
that's, and we
life.
can now go ahead and
Yeah,
transition. Let's
yeah, yeah.
transition as we talk about
Okay. Yeah.
transitions.
Yay.
Yes. Go ahead.
um, yeah. So my daughter, kind of amidst the mental health crises, and then a trauma that happened in our family to Avery specifically. Um, Amidst all of that, Avery also began exploring his gender and his gender identity. And throughout this process, there was just so much happening that it seemed as if the gender identity exploration was caused by either the mental health conditions or the trauma. And so it was very difficult for me to separate out, like, what is happening here? Like, is it my kid's traumatized and so that's why they want to be a boy? Is it just a normal thing that, was automatically going to happen to them and this is just their path? And so it was a real struggle for me to like, as a mother who, talk about grief,
Yes,
as
I
a,
was just going to say,
right.
because that's one thing too. When you've already set up the idea of what it is you thought your life was going to be with a daughter
Yes,
and a son, which you have, your
yes,
youngest is a son,
yes.
um, and then now you have two sons. So it's like, how do you then cope with that in your mind, right? So that's even just a grief there within. So go ahead and talk about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And I think I actually wrote an article on this that's going to be published in the Gay and Lesbian Review. I don't know the publication date, but it will be coming out at some point, and it is called "What I Wish I Had Known About My Gender Fluid Child." Or wish, something like that. Wish I wish I had known how to parent my gender fluid child. And basically, it talks about my experience, which is that I felt guilty for having grief because I wanted to be affirming. I wanted, I very much support people living in the gender that they feel that they are. And and I was like, "Oh my god, no, this is, how can you change you?" Like, what? So it was just this very conflictual feeling. And then I felt like, oh my god, maybe I'm transphobic. That's never been something I am or have wanted to be. And so it just brought up all of these really difficult feelings. And so I didn't reach out or really talk to other parents going through the same thing. I just felt like they're going to judge me. And what I've come to find out is that I would hope anyway that other parents wouldn't, and other parents would say, you know what, yeah, this is part of the process, and it's okay. It's okay that you're sad. It's okay that you're grieving. You don't want to be doing that with your child because that's not their role, but you want to be doing it because if you're pushing it down or just not acknowledging your grief, it's going to come back. It's going to come back when you least expect it, and it's going to be very, very difficult and traumatic, and will also influence how you're relating to your child unconsciously.
Mm,
So what I would say to parents who have children who are either exploring their gender identity, who are gender fluid, or who move into choosing a specific gender, um, don't don't judge yourself. One, you didn't do anything wrong. It's not because you did something that this is happening. And two, it's okay to be sad. They don't want to see their childhood pictures displayed in the house. So yeah, take them down, but don't get rid of them. Keep them for you because this is a person you knew. These are memories that you have and that you can cherish. It doesn't have to be like, okay, I erase that because those are yours.
mhm.
And I think the distinction is that we're not putting it on the child. We in our family, those who need to grieve, we're grieving that together.
Oh, that is so important. And what you said about the aspect of the pictures, I know of someone that had that situation and remember her sharing that it was like she had to grieve the death of her. I won't say which gender was before or after,
Yeah.
just to not make identifiable her this gender child to then because it was basically the death of that gender and that person that had been born to then this new identity that was now going to be identified with as her child. So there was that grieving component and continues to sometimes be. And she sometimes goes and looks at pictures of when her
Mhm.
child was a baby to kind of, reminisce on the child she had. And of course, is happy with the child she now has too and
Yeah.
loves. But it's that aspect of that duality of emotions that can come in just this one, scenario. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch upon on that subject?
Well, it's interesting because as Avery has kind of grown and changed over the years, Avery's now 20, just turned 20. Um, uh, Avery has actually moved into so interesting. My kid is such a trailblazer. Avery has decided that she doesn't care. She says, "Call me she, call me he." I confuse people all the time because sometimes I dress like a guy and I've taken some testosterone, so I have some male features, but I still have my female features. And some days I want to wear makeup and earrings and a dress. And so I do. And people are constantly confused. And I
Mm-hmm.
like that
Mm-hmm.
because it's a performance in a way. Like this
Mm-hmm.
isn't the essence of who I am ultimately isn't like a specific gender that is one stereotype or the other. I can kind of inhabit all of it and it's
Mm-hmm.
fun. And I kind of like confusing people. It's like a
Yeah.
commentary.
And
And
I actually, as you're saying that, now as Avery, as an adult, and in the book, there was that aspect that you were kind of like confused because Hannah had just told you that she identified as a he in the book, and then all of a sudden you saw her put, or him at that moment, wearing like pink something tutu or something like really bright
mm,
and dress or a dress and something, and you were kind of like confused. Was it for the Fallout Boy concert or something? I forget. There was
yeah,
something that in the book that then, and you're like, wait, I just thought he told me it's a he, like, and you were confused. So I guess fluid would be the right word then
Yep.
for Avery because of this. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you call me. The essence is still who I am is really the most important. Is who this individual is.
Yeah, and I think I did feel like it was a death as well. And I think I don't feel that way as much now because I see a continuity. Like I see the through line of, and I think it helps that Avery is gender fluid and is kind of like less attached,
Hmm.
because that helps me understand that yeah, gender is a construct. Gender is a performance. It's something that we inhabit, that for some people is like it's a cellular level. It's like I am all boy, that, or he, I am all man, that is who I am. But that's not who Avery is. Avery is a very fluid, creative person in his gender expression. And
Hmm.
so and he may decide later to go one way or the other, but it's like now I understand this is who my child is. And so yeah, I have photos on my phone that sometimes I look at just because I miss that child. But I think we can all relate to that as parents, because I don't know anybody whose child turned out the way that their parents thought they were going to.
You know what I do when I'm so mad at I have teenagers and I'm so mad at them
Mm.
or something. I go back and look at the pictures of when they were just so cute and like
Yes.
so lit, and it's kind of that you're what you're saying of like, oh my gosh, like, but look how cute they were, and they used to hug me and now they don't even hug me, and they used to want to cuddle with me and now they don't. All these things that we still grieve as a parent
Mhm.
regardless of the outcome of gender or whatever. It's just like
Yes.
you said, we are grieving that it may not look, parenting may not look the way we thought it was going to look like, and are not, and also I actually grieve more of even just how I am as a parent more than
Yes.
even who they are as kids. I'm like, man, this is not, I did not think I was going to be a nagging parent, and here I
Mhm.
am nagging so much that it drives me insane, so you're absolutely right. We all grieve in one shape or form in our parenting life role, I guess would be the thing. So thank you for bringing that
Yeah.
up. Now, Caitlin, let's talk then how people can, and by the way, everyone that's listening to this, you'll be able to go much deeper into all these different subjects that we've talked about. Caitlin's upbringing, growing up, the things that triggered your hospitalization, parenting, then now parenting your child, and all
Mhm.
these things in the book. So how can people get the book now
Yeah.
that it's out?
Yeah, so you can find it at any major bookseller. But I would love it if you would buy the book directly from me. And you can, there's a tab on my website in the menu called Buy.
Okay,
And go to that tab and you can order the book directly from me and I will ship it to you.
perfect.
um, that helps me as an author, because any other major bookseller, they are getting some of my money.
Right,
And
let's go straight to
that's,
you. Okay.
whatever, like we're a capitalist society and I accept that. And it would be nice to kind of be able to own some of the proceeds from my book.
Absolutely. And especially because you're doing the legwork right now. You're here on
Yes.
this podcast, you're getting. So, anybody listening to this podcast, you're going to go straight to the website link that I'm putting below in the profile notes, CaitlinBillings.com. And on there, go to buy, and you will buy the book directly from
Yes.
there rather than searching anywhere else. So, is there anything I did not ask you that you would want to tell the readers, either regarding grief or mental health or trauma, that you want to leave them with? Any nuggets that you want to
Yeah,
leave
I
them
think the nugget for me would be if you're a person who believes that you should have it all together or you shouldn't suffer in any way, that you know you need to be perfect because perfection is a myth that exists in our society, that you talk to somebody, that you seek help, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing, and in fact can be preventative. If I had sought therapy earlier, I don't know that I would have ended up hospitalized. There may have been a way to manage through it that looked different. It didn't have to be so extreme necessarily. And so I just urge people, like, contact a therapist. If you need somebody to talk to, it's confidential, it's private, and they're going to get it. They're,
Mhm.
they're really going to get it. And if they don't get it, find a different one. It's okay to interview a couple of therapists to find the right fit.
Perfect. Thank you
Yeah.
once again, Caitlin Billings, here on the podcast. And again, In Our Blood is out for you to purchase and straight from your website. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it was
Thank you so
great
much
being
for
here.
being here. Thank you for being
Yeah.
here.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.